Happy 2020, Brain Scratchers. It's John Lorden, and I'm back with our very first video for the year on the Lorden Arts channel. Of course, it's a Monday, and that means we've got an episode of Case Cracked, the show where we look into a mystery and figure out what's the piece that actually broke that case wide open. We've got a great one lined up for you today, and before I started, I just wanted to thank everyone out there for supporting the channel over these past several years. 2019 was a really good year on a lot of fronts, and I couldn't do any of that without you guys. So thank you so much for being supporters of the Lorden Arts channel, myself, Christy Arnhart, everyone else that works so hard to bring you this content. We really appreciate you guys. All right, let's get into today's case. This is what I like to consider a case of very convenient amnesia. At the end of summer in 1995, two grisly murders would bring towns in two different states together and unite them in a search for justice. Just after midnight on September 28th, a New Britain, Connecticut police officer was patrolling the local shopping plaza when he came upon something odd behind the local CT Beverage Mart. As he drew closer, he could see that it was a sleeping bag. Thinking he would find some poor homeless soul trying to sleep for the night, he gently unfolded the layers to find the body of a young woman. The body was still warm, wrapped in the sleeping bag and another plastic garbage bag. She appeared to have been killed by a single gunshot to the head. She wore a Croquet brand brown pullover hoodie, Union Bay jeans, LA Gear sneakers, a gold herringbone necklace, a ring with a pink stone, and a Gitano watch. As officers in this Hartford suburb searched through their missing persons reports trying to track down the identity of the young woman, another body was found. On October 6th, just 8 days and 40 miles away in the Tolan State Forest in Tolan, Massachusetts, a man and his wife were pulling their camper in. They were headed towards the dumping station in order to fill their mobile home tanks with water when they both noticed a very distinct odor. Looking up the embankment beside the station, they saw what they thought must have been a Halloween prank, a dummy, likely left there by children. After all, Halloween was only weeks away. But as the husband drew closer, he could see that it, in fact, was a woman's body. The older woman was just 8 feet from the embankment. State troopers were dispatched at 4:30 p.m. after receiving the call from a park ranger. As with the body found in Connecticut, no identification was found with the victim, but unlike the younger woman, this woman's extremities had been damaged by local wildlife, which made it even more difficult to verify her identity. Local District Attorney William Bennett would say, "Right now, we have the body in the woods and we have no information beyond that." The woman found in the forest appeared to have been dead for about a week before being found. She, too, had been killed by a single gunshot wound to the head, but unlike the first victim, an intact slug was pulled from a fence near the body. With no other information to go on, police waited to receive more info, maybe a missing persons report that would come through and help them identify the woman. But the weeks followed, and officers would wind up releasing descriptions and pictures of the older woman's clothes in the hopes that someone would recognize those. She was also found wearing maroon-rimmed prescription glasses and had an upper bridge with a full set of teeth. Unfortunately, even with all that information going out into the public, no one came forward and no new missing persons reports came in. And with that, the trail would soon grow cold. By September of 1996, officers in Massachusetts and Connecticut had determined that the two cases were connected, but they couldn't show any proof of the connection. Connecticut police investigated their case while Massachusetts State Police focused on theirs. Clothing the two women wore could be found in unique stores in the Albany, New York area. At the scene of the older woman's murder, officers also found a cigarette pack with an upstate tax stamp that they traced to New York as well. Sketches of both victims were released yet again, but even with this new information, there were still no leads, no tips being called in. It would take another 15 years for police to publicly link the two cases and definitively show that the two women had lived or at least spent time in the greater Albany area. Enhanced DNA testing would reveal that the two were, in fact, mother and daughter. State police investigators announced that the mother and daughter, one aged roughly 40 and the other about 17, were residents or spent time in the Albany, New York area before their deaths, but police still had no suspects. More years would pass, and in June of 2014, the call investigators were waiting for would finally come in. New York State Police contacted the investigators in Massachusetts and Connecticut, telling them a woman in Virginia Beach, Virginia, filed a missing persons report. That missing persons report that both those departments have been waiting for, literally for years. She stated that 3 of her family members, Marcia, her husband Robert, and their daughter Elizabeth, all of Brewster, New York, had disappeared without a trace 19 years earlier. Marcia and Robert Haunch moved from the Bronx, New York to Brewster, which is just over the border from Connecticut, in 1979 after Elizabeth was born. Both had children from previous relationships that would stay with the couple on and off throughout their time together. Those children would recall many incidents of violence in the home. One of the children in particular remembered seeing Marcia running out of the couple's bedroom, bleeding from the mouth after a fight with Robert. Then in late 1995, Robert announced that he, Marcia, and Elizabeth would be moving to Australia. He stated that Marcia had already left to start her new job, and Robert and his daughter Elizabeth would soon follow. As the winter months crawled by, no one heard from any member of the Haunch family. Fearing that something had gone wrong, one of Marcia's relatives with a connection to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement learned that the Haunches had never left for Australia. Marcia's family would never hear from her or Elizabeth again. However, Robert's family would hear from him. In 2006, his brother and sister-in-law in upstate New York received a letter from a woman who claimed to be Haunch's wife, a woman named Cheryl Tyree. She said that she and Robert had lived with their children in Ohio for many years under her last name. The family and Cheryl communicated through letters for several years. Cheryl stated that she had met Robert in Louisiana in 2005 or 2006. He said he was working as a truck driver and had just returned from Africa. Within months of dating, the two were married. Robert told her that he had no other marriages, no children, and was an only child with both parents having passed away. Robert's family countered by mailing a picture of both Marcia and Elizabeth to the couple. When Robert was shown the picture, he said that he did not recognize the two women. But in November of 2013, Robert's story would start to change. When he was contacted directly by Marcia's family, they were told that Marcia had met another man and left him, taking Elizabeth with her. As the relative probed deeper for information, Haunch would again change his story and claim that he could tell them no more because he was suffering from amnesia. With information learned throughout years of correspondence, the families felt that they knew Robert had a hand in the deaths of his wife and daughter, and they contacted police. At the start of 2014, investigators from Connecticut and Massachusetts went to Ohio to speak with Robert Haunch, easily tracking him to his home in Kidron, Ohio. It seemed that even though he had changed his last name, he was still using his original Social Security number and date of birth. After obtaining a search warrant for his home, investigators took a piece of Robert's hair and inked impressions of his palms, as well as conducted several interviews. Robert was working a minimum wage factory job in Ohio and attending a Mennonite church. He admitted to investigators that something must have happened in 1995 to make him lose touch with all his family, but due to his amnesia, he could not remember the event. When investigators showed him a picture of the sleeping bag used to cover Elizabeth's body, he confirmed that it was indeed his, but he had no idea how it or her body ended up where they did. Investigators quickly countered with the fact that Haunch's palm prints matched those found on the trash bag that covered Elizabeth's body. Robert stopped talking and requested an attorney. It would make little difference, as other pieces of evidence collected from his Ohio home would positively link him to both crime scenes. At his trial, Robert Haunch would require a court-appointed attorney, as he said he was just steps away from being destitute. In June of 2017, a Hampton Superior Court jury found him guilty of murder in connection with the fatal shooting of his wife, Marcia. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Haunch was also charged with the murder of his daughter, Elizabeth. That trial is still currently continuing. However, attorneys see no problem in getting a conviction with such overwhelming evidence. Sheila Haunch Maloney, the oldest of Marcia Haunch's living daughters, gave a victim statement on behalf of her family. In it, she called Robert Haunch a pathological liar and said, quote, "The seemingly mild-mannered old man is a monster with no feelings, whose actions altered the lives of more than 50 people in her family alone." She ended her statement by saying, "Our mother, Marcia Haunch, was a decent woman and way too good a person to be married to this monster. My sisters and I spent our days wondering what on earth could be keeping our mother and little sister away from us, and spent our nights in quiet tears so as to not alarm our husbands and our children. So many years and years of torment and heartache. Your Honor, for the love of God, I respectfully ask that this court put a stop to this madman and make it impossible for Robert Haunch to ever destroy the future of anyone ever again." Case cracked. I would like to give a big thank you to LOHUD.com, Heavy.com, MassLive.com, NBCConnecticut.com, and of course, Christy Arnhart for writing up today's case. And this is a case that certainly has just a very weak excuse at the core of it. I'm wondering if the amnesia thing is even true, or if he's just hiding behind that, or if there is some type of psychological break that has happened because of what he did at that time, where maybe he's trying to not actually face what he has done to his family. There was also something else that came out in the research. Robert actually had another daughter during a temporary separation from Elizabeth. That daughter, who's named Celeste Murillo, left his care in 1993 and thinks that leaving him probably saved her life. If she would have hung around for another few years, who knows what would have happened. She also suggests that the relationship that he seemed to want from her was a bit inappropriate. And I think we'll just leave it at that. Another sign of a case that takes, well over a decade to solve, but eventually the right information got in the right hands. And that's really what a lot of these cases need. It really came down to that missing persons report finally being filed, and it taking such a long time. Some people would question that. Just why would it take so long? If you don't know where a loved one is, file it. Sooner is better than later. And I think that's something that maybe we can all learn just from looking at this story. But admittedly, there was some very strange circumstances going on here. And you had a man that, in terms of his family, wasn't necessarily missing. He was, at least his wife was in contact with his family. So I could see how that missing persons report got delayed. But if you have something like this in your family and you can't find reasonable answers, I think filing that missing persons report sooner rather than later is probably a prudent and important step, just like this case demonstrates to us. It's terrible, and I really hope that this family, on both sides, because even Robert's family becomes victims in this in some way as well, knowing that they have a loved one that has committed crimes like this, literally ended the lives of people on this planet, is certainly no easy thing for them to process as well. And then, of course, on Marcia and Elizabeth's side, you've got other family. There's a lot of hurt people when something like this goes down, and I just always have to wonder, if a relationship is that bad, why don't you just get out of it? Why is this the way to end it? And we see it time and time again. And I just hope that someday that could change. Maybe that's too big of a wish, but that's how I'm starting my 2020. Big thank you to PayPal donations from Sherry Brand, Amanda Beard, Randy Volkel, and Emma Rostrom. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you would like to do the same, you can go to www.lordandarts.com. You can do a PayPal donation. You can set up Patreon. You can buy merch. All of it helps keep me here doing what I love doing, spending time with you, looking into these stories, and learning these valuable lessons. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here on Wednesday with a brand new episode of Searchlight on the Lord and Arts channel.